Hey everybody, it's Kyle Jetzel, your friendly neighborhood driven autism dad. So today I want to talk about something that I've seen a lot of parents struggle with, and there's a secret to this that I want to share with you. And the thing that I've seen a lot of autism parents struggle with, I work with a lot of autism parents, and they seem to struggle with, how do you do it? I mean, they know what they should do. You know, when things get hard or when their kids melt down in public, they know what they should do, but they just can't do it, right? Maybe they're tired, maybe it's been a long day. You want to be patient and kind and loving, but you can't, because you know what you should do, right? I mean, we have the strategies available to us to be successful as parents, but we just can't seem to do it. We get frustrated or angry, or, you know, we're exhausted and we just can't do the things we need to do. And so, I just did a Masterclass where I talked about this and how we as a family had to learn how to step into those strategies when we needed them, even when it got hard, right? So I'm going to share with you a quick experience that I had in the past year after my wife passed away. My wife passed away in October of 2021. So it's been about a year and some months. And obviously, I was a big fan of my wife. I still am. We were married for 30 years. We had a top 1% happy marriage. So losing her was a traumatic event for me. So traumatic. And as you can imagine, everywhere I went, everything I did reminded me of her. And I would see things and it would remind me of her, and I would just kind of emotionally break down. And frankly, I'm an emotional rock. I'm going to tell you that right now. I really am. But this one tore me apart. I mean, I remember my daughter saying, "Hey, we need to go over to Costco to pick up some stuff." And we hopped in the car and we went over to Costco, and, you know, no big deal, right? You go to Costco, right? And we get to Costco, and when I walk inside, I realize I've never been in Costco without my wife. We were married for 30 years. And frankly, I didn't know where anything was at. And it shook me. And I had to really work hard not to just to break into tears. And this was happening all over the place. I mean, I'd walk into a 7-Eleven and I'd realize she's not here. Or, I mean, everywhere, everything I did. When you're married to somebody for 30 years, everything, she's everywhere. And I'm grateful for that now, but at the time, it was tough. I'd see an old couple smiling at each other, and I would get emotional and overwhelmed, because I would realize I don't get to grow old with my wife, right? Or I'd see a young couple smiling at each other, and I'd get mad that she's not there with me. Or I'd see, I mean, everything. I couldn't go into my own bedroom for almost a month after my wife passed away. And I realized that I really needed to manage myself in a way that allowed me to be successful and show my kids that everything was okay. They needed to know everything was okay. Obviously, I talked to them about how painful it was and that it was a traumatic experience, but I couldn't walk around with tears in my eyes every minute of every day. That just wasn't going to be what my kids needed. It really wasn't healthy for me either. And so I went back to the drawing board and dove into some of the strategies we had created to manage ourselves when things got difficult for my sons on the autism spectrum. And here's what's interesting. The reason I think we had so much success as a family, and how we could do the right things at the right times. You know, like I said at the beginning, sometimes we know what we should do, but we can't do it, right? And it's because typically when things go wrong, we usually can automatically snap into a fight or flight situation, fight or flight or freeze. And we don't really think logically anymore about what we need to do to manage that situation. We just get either frustrated or angry, or hit the fight or flight button and kind of get stuck there. And that can tend to make us escalate it and join in the chaos with our kids, and that's really not healthy for them. So one of the things I started doing is anytime I would have those emotions where I'd walk in somewhere and I realize this is the first time I've been here without my wife, or I hadn't, the last time I was here I was with my wife, which was everywhere, I would go home and write it down. And I would say, I would just write down some notes to myself and say, today I was overwhelmed with emotion because I'm looking over to my right, Krispy Kreme, without my wife. Krispy Kreme wasn't even in business before my wife and I got married. And so, I would write that down, and write down also the next time I go into Krispy Kreme, I'm going to be ready for it. I'm going to prepare myself so that I'm not shocked by it. Okay? And this is one of the things we did as a family, and it's really the secret to being able to do what you should do when things get hard. And that's this. You really have to take some time to internalize those strategies. Right? If you're at the mall and your son or daughter starts to melt down and starts screaming and yelling and pitching a fit or whatever it is they're doing, you have to be able to snap into the most productive state you can be in. And you have to really know exactly what steps you're going to take in those situations and internalize those steps. So when it happens, you say, I know what to do. And you do it in a spirit of kindness and love, and you don't get sucked into the chaos that can ensue. So hopefully that's helpful. There's a real trick to managing yourself when things start to go horribly wrong. And we talk about that in the Masterclass. I just created a Masterclass, and I'll post a link below this. But the reality is, you can do what you should do when you should do it if you internalize it. In our Masterclass, we talk about how to internalize it. So go check that out. That's really the secret. Just last week, my oldest son was over. My youngest, or my middle son, who's more severe on the spectrum, got tipped into a meltdown by something and was super frustrated, really angry, on the verge of violence. And I handled it. I went over, took care of it, managed it, and then came back. And my son, my oldest son, who's seen me do this a million times, he said to me, I'm always just shocked at your discipline and patience. And I said, I don't really see it like that. I don't see it as discipline or patience. I see it as I've internalized what I need to do in those situations, and I do it. And that includes doing it in a spirit of love, right? I know what steps I'm going to take. I know exactly what state I need to put myself into. I know exactly how to handle those situations. I know what works best for him and for me and for my family, and I'm going to do that every time. And it's just a matter of internalizing those strategies, whether it's for, when your child has a meltdown, or, getting them to eat, or, some kids like to argue. You got to have a strategy for that. You got to have a strategy for defiance. I had a family whose daughter wouldn't get ready. She wouldn't put her clothes on for school. It's creating huge problems, and she was just defiant. And we put together a strategy. They used the strategy, and it starts working. And it works every time, right? And so they say, hey, let's get ready for school. And she says, no! And they go into the strategy, and they get her dressed, and they get her to school. It's fantastic, right? It's not discipline. It's not patience. It's knowing what to do and being able to do it when it's called upon. But that's the hardest part, right? So go over and watch the Masterclass. I'll put a link below.